potatoes and rabbets over at the radial arm saw with the stacked dado head cutter, just as I did with the corner post. Now we're ready for some assembly. And I'm going to start working on the gable end. The corner posts are in each corner, connected by this member which goes across the lower part. It's a simple matter of slipping the piece into the dados and securing everything with 2.5-inch screws. The next piece is this 2x4 that joins the top. The two gable end sections are connected with these long pieces. Now you might have noticed that I'm not pre-drilling for the screws. That's because it's a special screw. It has a special tip that will drill a hole as it's driven in. It's also coated so that it'll be unaffected by the pressure-treated lumber. Now this short 2x4 fits into the dados of the long members, and I've cut a half-lap joint so that it really ties everything together and adds a lot of strength. Well, I flipped the entire framework upside down on the workbench, and now I'm installing a lightweight frame, just like the one at the bottom. I made it from half 2x4s, so it really doesn't carry any weight. So here I've been making some partitions out of 1x8 cedar. I need 8 in all, and what they do is fit in the framework, 2 of them at each corner. Well, now I want to subdivide the long sides of the Dovecote. So I've nailed a piece of flooring on the bottom and a piece of the ceiling at the top. And now I'm just taking a piece of 1x8 as the divider. Once this is in place, I'm just going to fill in all the floor areas and all the ceiling areas. Each compartment has an upper and lower floor. So I'm going to use this piece of scrap as a gauge to attach this little cleat which will support the floor shelf. With the floors and partitions nailed in place, I still have a little gap here in the corner. So I ripped some 1x1 stock that I'm just going to nail in place. Now in order for the middle floors and the dividers on the long sides to align with the framework, I need to build them out. So I ripped some strips that I'm just going to nail on. Okay, now I've taken my stacked dado head cutter out of the radial arm and installed it in my table saw so that I could rabbet the length of these 1x6s, 12 in all, and I'll show you where they go. Now each corner I'm going to use 2 of these, and how they set is right in like this and one butted right against it like that. And then over here on the long run, I'm going to put 1 on each side of the center partition. Now the little rabbets that I made are going to hold boards that go in between later. With this much of it together, you start to get a sense of how big each compartment is going to be for the birds. Well, you know, I've been in hotel rooms that are smaller than this. But believe it or not, we're ready to start trimming out the exterior. The siding has a nice decorative bead, as well as the corner boards. They're just produced in a slightly different manner. I'm going to start with the corner boards. So So I've set up my router table with a beading bit. I've put this feather board on to hold the stock tight against the fence, and I've hooked up my vac to take away the chips. I'll show you how it works. To install the corner boards, I'm going to use a piece of scrap material which is equal to the thickness of the siding on the gable end as a gauge. Just bring it out even and tack it in place with a couple nails. Well, now I'll show you how I made the siding. It's a useful technique. You could use it for interior paneling or exterior siding. It's a shiplap design. There's a bead at the top edge of each board with a rabbet. And then each board that lays above it also has a rabbet, so it interlocks like this. Therefore, water will be shed away instead of running in. I started by running each board through, making this bead. To do that, I used the same bit that I used on the corner boards, except that I've raised it up. And I just run the board through. Now with the bead complete, the next thing I want to do is knock off this corner so that it looks like this. I use the same bit, this time I lower it. Next, I want to make the rabbet close to the bead. So it's back to the table saw and the stacked dado head cutter. Okay, now with a slight adjustment to the height of the dado and the ripped fence, I can now run the opposite edge. Well, I think that's enough for today. Tomorrow, I'll install the siding, frame the roof, shingle it, and then cut the openings. And of course, after that, there's the bathrooms and the wall-to-wall carpeting. It's really starting to look more like a packing crate than a Dovecote, but have faith, it'll start to take shape. I'm completing the siding this morning. 3 sides are done, 1 to go. I cut the pieces so that they fit snugly between the corner boards. And everything that I've put together so far is nailed with 4-penny galvanized finish nails that come in clips and fit in my pneumatic nailer. Okay. It's not necessary to measure each piece of siding as we go up one of the walls. It's much more accurate to use a stop block. So what I've done at the radial arm is set it up so that I square one end of the board first, slide it down to a block that's set precisely for the measurement I need, and cut the other end. Okay, well that's all the siding I want to do for now. Next, I want to cut the holes for the roofs. I suppose there are a lot of ways that I could have attached the perch to the side of the Dovecote. I could have used dowels, I could have mortised them in, I could even have fastened them with some screws from the inside. But I decided to use biscuits. So while the piece is still up on the workbench, I'm going to use my biscuit cutter to make a slot at each opening. The rafters for our Dovecote are not unlike the rafters you might find in your own house. They have a 45-degree slope, or a 12-12, a 12-inch rise over a 12-inch run. At the ridge, there's a vertical cut where they butt together. No need for a ridge board on such a small project. And down at the bottom, there's a crow's foot that sits on top of the plate. Now, I'll make the crow's foot at the radial arm saw. I've taken the 2x4 and laid out the cut I need to make, and then tipped the saw to 45 degrees. 2 passes will take care of it. Now, to make the cut at the ridge, I've turned my miter saw to 45 degrees and installed a stop block for the correct length. Now, there's one more thing I want to do before I set the rafters in place, and that's slip the boards in that form the rest of the back of each roost. It has a rabbet on each edge, and it slips into the boards we've already installed. It's a little loose, and that's because I want to be able to take it out should I ever have to clean one of the roosts. I'll just hold it in place with one screw. Okay, now to start setting the rafters, the first thing I'm going to do is drive one nail down through the top edge, a 16-penny spike, right into the corner of the plate. Okay, now I've switched to 8-penny nails, and I'm putting one nail in at the ridge, and I'm going to toe a nail in down to the plate. Now, one more precaution. To keep any critters from getting up into the attic space, I'm going to install a piece of screen. This will also let air circulate on the underside of the roof shingles, keeping them from curling. These little cleats just give a little more added support to the screen. Well, now I'm ready to set the base for the shingles. There's only one way to do a wood shingle roof, and that's to use straps like this. You don't want to put it over plywood. It has to breathe. Now, the spacing that I'm using is 4.5 inches on center, which is the same as the exposure on the shingles. The rake boards are next. They're beaded just like the corner boards, and they're mitered at the top at a 45-degree angle and square at the bottom. You'll notice I've installed a couple cleats on top of the shingle slats, and that's just so that when I set the board by bringing it tight to the cleat, I know it's in exactly the right position. Let's look at the prototype again. I want to make this fascia board, and down at the bottom corner I've put a little cove, and I'll do that with a router. Now, if I apply this fascia board as is, the only place it's going to hit the siding is on this point. But if I bevel the edge, I'll have a broader surface for it to fit. I'll do that at the joiner. Well, how about a shingle lesson? We're going to use these western red cedar shingles. Now it's important that I have a little bit of overhang for the shingle beyond the fascia board. So I've installed this little strip of wood temporarily, I'll take it off later, to act as a gauge. I'll just hold the shingle even with that. I won't have to measure. It's also important that I have the shingle overhang the rake board. So I'm going to put another little cleat right on the side like this. A shingle that's too wide like this is likely to buckle. Okay, that's it for the starter course. Now I lay another course holding the bottom edges even and making sure that I overlap any of the joints by at least an inch. Now this mark is 4.5 inches up from the bottom, which is the exposure of our shingles. I've marked each end of the roof, and now I'm going to tack on a straight edge and lay down the next course. Now you can see why it's so handy to have the cleat. You can lay out all the shingles, shift them around as necessary, and then nail it all up. Now, of course, as I get close to the ridge, I have to cut the top edge of the shingles off so they won't stick over. Okay, well, a couple pieces of cedar at the ridge completes the roof. Now all I have left to do is make and install the perches. Now to make the perches, I'm using another jig. Except this time, the router follows the outer edge of the jig. Same bit, same collar. Now, a biscuit slot in the end of the perch, and it can be installed. A little bit of waterproof glue on the biscuit, some in the slot. Set that in place. And a little bit of glue on the end of the perch and in that slot. Okay, and I should just have to squeeze it in place. Shouldn't need any clamps. And just wipe off any excess glue. Well, all right. I'd say that just about does it. We'll have to build some sort of base for it and find a place out in the landscape. And the last thing to do is take an ad out in the Pigeon News. Rooms for rent. Well, we've decided to install our Dovecote out by this stone wall. And I've elevated it on this frame of pressure-treated lumber that sits on concrete blocks and has outriggers as stabilizers. In fact, the other night we had some 60-mile-an-hour winds, and it did just fine. Now, where are the pigeons?